Hi, everybody.
Hello, I'm Ryan.
I'm Bethany.
And we are Ryan and Bethany Board Game Reviews.
And today we'll be talking about Star Trek Discovery Black Alert. But before we do, we want to remind you to subscribe so you can see our videos as they come out. Now, Star Trek Discovery Black Alert is designed by Len Vander Studio, and it is published by WizKids.
You guys, there are a whole bunch of different iterations of Star Trek out there. And guess what? They're all rubbish.
Oh my gosh, you can't say that. Like, people are real fans of this stuff.
Well, that's not my fault, it's theirs.
No. I personally have only actually watched Voyager, but I did enjoy that. I watched it as a kid and I liked it.
So specifically to get ready for this review and for this game, we did go to the library and we checked out the what is it called? Discovery show, and we watched it for a bit, and it was like, okay.
I think
it was okay.
Okay, from us not being Trekkies, from us not knowing anything of the universe, it felt like when we started watching it, we jumped in on the middle of the conversation. Like, we were a little bit lost. We didn't know the terminology. We didn't understand the world. Like, there was nothing to ease us into it. And I'm sure that if you're already a fan of Star Trek and the world and the universe, you already know all of that stuff. But for us, it felt like literally walking in the middle of a conversation.
So if you are a Star Trek person out there, and what is the best jumping off point? Like, what's the entry point for a non-fan? Not saying we'll get around to watching that because we don't have a lot of free time. But if we did, where would you suggest we start?
They're going to say Voyager.
Well, maybe. I don't know. All right, so we did get a chance to watch some of that, so we would have a little bit of a game plan going into this of what it was about. But basically, we are trapped in this kind of this mirror universe. There's two teams. This is a team-based game. You have one team that is trying to escape the mirror universe, the other team that is trying to keep them locked in the mirror universe. Let me give you a quick overview of how to play. All right, here is our setup. Basically, in the middle of the board, we have all of space. This is the space that we'll be traveling all around. We also have all these different mission planets. There are 6 of them are on the outsides of the boards. At the beginning of the game, you're going to shuffle those up and choose 3 of them. Those are going to be your missions over here that the Discovery team needs to complete in order to win the game. So we have 2 teams. We have the Discovery. We also have, I believe it's pronounced Charon. The Discovery wins by completing their 3 objectives. The Charon wins by infiltrating the Discovery 3 times. Alternatively, you can get damage. If one of your teams gets 5 damage, the other team wins that way as well. So that's kind of what we're working towards. All over the board, we have all these different kind of paths and twisty things connecting all these different planets and these different nodes and spots in space. So the way that the Charon is going to move around, or the Charon, is basically just going to move from hex to hex. They're just going to pick up and move to the next adjacent hex. However, the Discovery, they're going to follow the nodes until the next spot. So maybe in this case, it's a huge long one, because it kept on following until it gets to one of those nodes. This is primarily made for 4 players. You can also play a 2 or 3-player version, but in the 4-player game, we've got 2 players over here, we've got 2 players over there. Those are the different locations on the ships, and each one of those locations does a different action. But you can also see that on each side there's a red and a blue, and a red and a blue, and they're facing each character. Well, why is that? You actually get a chance to board the other player's ships and do actions on their ships. That can be really strong, give you some additional things that you can do. And if you ever forget what your options are, this chart over here, each player is going to get one of these, each team is going to get one of these. This basically shows you all the different options you have as the Starfleet side, and all the different sides you have as the Terrans. Basically on your own ship, and then on your opponent's ships as well. Each player is going to have a hand of cards that looks like this. So he's going to have a number at the top left, and it's also going to have some kind of a text, some kind of action ability that's going to happen on the bottom of the card. Those numbers that are on the top left of the cards, those are called resolve numbers. Those resolve numbers can be used to either try to take over those missions if you are the Discovery team, or they can be used to do a challenge. Challenges are where basically you have a chance to do a really strong action. However, the other team gets a chance to challenge you. In which case, you basically choose some cards from your hand, you reveal them simultaneously, and you say, hey, my resolve is bigger than yours, so I'm going to cancel your action. Or the other way around, hey, as the person doing the action, I have more resolve, so I'm going to continue with my action as planned. However, it's kind of a balancing act because some of those cards that have higher resolve also have really strong actions attached to them as well. So maybe you want to hang on to them in order to do their action, but at the same time, you really don't want to miss out on this challenge. So do you use the card or do you hold on to it? It's a really nice kind of a decision point in the game. A turn might look like this. Basically, we're going to start by drawing up to our hand size, which most of the time is going to be 3. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take one of our figures and we're going to move it to another spot in the ship that we're at. And then we take whatever action is there. And don't forget, we have that handy chart that's going to tell us what actions we can do on each one of the ships. Alternatively, instead of doing the action that's printed on this location, what can happen is, over the course of the game, we can get damage. When that happens, we're going to draw a card from this damage deck, we're going to put it over that matching location, meaning that we can no longer use that location until it's been repaired. So what we can do is we can go to that location, and we can either pay that amount of resolve, or those resources in order to repair that location. Keep in mind, though, that the opponent can still use that location even when it's damaged. And the third action you can do is you can return to your own ship from no matter where you are. So let's say I was over here on the Charon ship. I can just kind of transport over to my ship in order to, that would be a whole turn. The cards in your hand are considered free actions. You can do those whenever you want to, whatever's most advantageous for you. That does not count as your action that turn. Activating these locations, that's your action. But don't forget, you don't redraw your hand until the beginning of your turn, so you may want to leave some strong cards back in your hand, just in case your opponent does something that you're going to want to challenge. As the red team, as the Terrans, we also have 2 little fleet ships on the board. We're going to be moving those around. We're going to be moving ourselves around, trying to prevent the Discovery from getting to its locations. Also, when we're in the same location as the Discovery, what we can do is we can use our characters, hop aboard their side of the ship, and then we can try to do our infiltration actions. Infiltration actions are some of the cards that are in our deck. They're going to basically tell us to go to a certain location and win a challenge. And instead of going to that location and doing that location's action, instead, we've infiltrated their ship. If we do that 3 different times, we're going to win the game. There's a little bit of a resource management in the game as well. We've got 3 different resources over there, and as you kind of roam the board, you can use your actions to gain resources. Those resources can be used to either win some of your challenges that you need to in your missions, or they can be used to kind of bump up the actions. Like some things might say things like, you can gain 1 resource from your node, or you can spend a resource to do it 3 times. So they can kind of bump up the strength of your actions. We have these little corruption tokens. These are going to be kind of spreading out all over the board, as well as we have our 2 fleet ships like we talked about. What's going to happen is, whenever the Discovery runs into one of those tokens, either the fleets or the corruptions, they're going to have to flip over one of those corruption cards. And what it's going to do is it's going to tell you some kind of punishment you're going to receive, whether you do with a corruption or whether it was a fleet you ran into. It's going to tell you what you have to deal with, and that can cause a lot of problems for you. Alright, so remember, the Terrans are going to try to infiltrate the Discovery ship. The Discovery ship is trying to complete its missions, and you can also lose by getting too much damage on your ship as well. So those are the kind of the win conditions that you're looking out for. Whoever can complete their goals first is going to be declared the winner.
I thought the way that the tiles were set up in this game was really cool. So all of the tiles, there's, the mission tiles and the network tiles, and then there's like that starting tile, but when you're playing as Discovery, you're using the Spore Drive, and so it's literally a line throughout the board, and you have to stop at different node points, and it was so cool. It was such an interesting way to move about the board and to just go about it like that. It kind of reminded us of Suro, of how you have to follow that line, and also I thought it was cool because sometimes well, you do it randomly, so you don't know how it's going to be set up. And that middle tile allows you to go in any direction you want to go. It's separate from the rest. When we were shuffling them, I was like, why is this tile smaller? It's because it's different from everything else. But there's also an action you can do to turn a tile to get you to going into a different direction. So I just thought that way of movement was a really neat system.
I liked the asymmetry between the 2 different sides. Not only in win conditions, correct? They have 2 different win conditions. One team is trying to escape. One team is trying to keep them there, infiltrate, and keep them there by damaging their ship. But then either team can also lose by having their ship being damaged, either through their own actions or the actions of their opponent. So I like how there's both sides had 2 different win conditions, and they were different as well.
Yeah.
But also, not only that, but the way that they actually interacted with the board was also different as well. So, for instance, like Bethany mentioned, the way they move around is different. The way that they use their weapons is different. The way that they use their collecting resources is different. Every spot is different. So I think that was really the nice asymmetry between the 2 things, right? Yeah. Their decks were a little bit differently constructed. They had different kinds of things going on in there. The way they interacted with the corruption tokens on the board. Everything about it was just asynchronous, which I thought was led to a lot of different variety.
Yeah.
We could play each side different ways and different times, and get a lot of gameplay out of that.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, I thought the game was pretty well balanced as well. Whenever somebody won, the other team was always within 1 or 2 turns of winning as well. So I thought when you have that asynchronous abilities going on and doing slightly different things, the fact that you're still able to balance it well enough to where the teams are within a turn from winning, I thought was really good. And it also, one of the things I hate in games is when there's no point, like you feel so defeated, but you have to finish playing out the game. And that doesn't happen with this. You're still able to meet objectives while the other person is meeting objectives. So you always feel like you have a chance when you're playing.
I thought that the characters, the ability to go to other ships was really interesting concept, right? So we've played games like, let's say Scythe, where you have your own little player board where you go to here, take an action, you go to here, take an action, whatever. But what about you go to somebody else's area of their board and take their actions? That was a really interesting take on all of that. So as long as you were in the same spot, you could hop over into their ship, teleport over there or whatever, and then you are taking actions on their ship. You could be trying to damage their stuff. You could try to take resources, stealing resources out of their cargo bay or whatever the case is. So I thought that was a really fun way of kind of doubling the amount of actions you can take while still keeping it just two ships. That was a cool take that I hadn't seen before.
I would say that I would recommend this at the 4-player count and not the 2-player count. It plays very similarly. Playing 2-player, but with 4-player, you get extra characters that are involved in it, and you're able to be in more places in your ship instead of having to move around. You can even have somebody dedicated to your ship and somebody dedicated to your opponent's ship. So I just really recommend playing the 2 versus 2 instead of the 1 versus 1.
Yeah, even the challenges themselves get a little bit more intricate, but also more kind of exciting as well when you're doing it with 4 players. There's even a 3-player mode, but that's like even a whole separate thing. I consider this a 2 or a 4-player game.
Yes.
Best at 4.
Overall, I liked it. I thought it was a pretty good game. I'm kind of surprised I don't hear people talking about it. I thought that there'd be a lot more people interested in this. I wonder if maybe Discovery just isn't that huge in the Star Trek fandom, but I don't actually know. But I was pleasantly surprised with this. I thought they did a good job. I thought the balance was good. I thought the abilities that you had and moving around, I mean, it made sense after I played like maybe 5 turns. I'm like, oh, I understand what I'm doing now and why I'm doing it. That's very important. So overall, I thought this is a pretty good game.
I mean, my hang up was for this who the audience was in terms of like the fan base versus gamers, and what the Venn diagram in between them is. I feel like, would the average Star Trek fan want to play a more involved game?
Yeah.
And conversely, would more gamers choose to play an involved game that had this IP on it?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think there's probably a decent sized Venn diagram overlap, but at the same time, like you said, I don't hear a lot of people talking about it yet. Maybe it's a slow burn.
Yeah.
Or maybe just because Star Trek is terrible.
Oh my gosh, you can't say that, Ryan.
I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding. But it was a fun game. I enjoyed the challenge. I like the 2-on-2. A neat game.
Ryan doesn't think Star Trek is horrible. He's just a Star Wars person. And you can't be both, I guess, they say.
That's what my dad taught me.
Yeah, so
and
I guess
he's a smart guy.
It's funny that you say that because my dad is not a Star Wars person, but he does really like Star Trek. So maybe you can't. Maybe your brain.
It's just too much
stuff.
Time.
Yes,
too much time spent on one show that has the word star in it.
Well, with that said, make sure to subscribe so you can see our videos as they come out, and you can always find us in all of these places.
You guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
You guys, thanks so much for watching. This game was provided to us by a publisher in exchange for a fair and honest review.
And if you want to see more stuff, check out over here to see something we think you might like.
And over here, we think that YouTube has picked out a great video for you you're going to love. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.